Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, as Season 2 progresses in Diablo 4, there is a question that is on everyone's minds. How do I get more powerful? This is often the biggest desire of most Diablo players at any given moment, honestly, because the real endgame of Diablo is getting to the point where you simply cannot get more powerful, which some people do reach, others don't. But right now, there is far more reason to do so than we've ever had before, which is the arrival of the brand new endgame activity coming on December 5th, the Abattoir of Zir. This is a limited time event with scaling difficulty where the first tier has enemies that are a higher level than a tier 100 nightmare dungeon, and there are 25 tiers of this activity, each one not only providing a challenge to players that increases in difficulty exponentially as you progress, but also offering the reward of increasingly higher scaling glyph XP on completion. The main reason for this is because the event will also come with its own uniquely extremely powerful brand new Paragon glyph that will take an insane amount of glyph XP to actually level up the entire way, with its max level being 200. And so the best way to do that will be, well, pushing the abattoir as far as you can go. And to do that, you will need to be as strong as possible. There are the obvious ways that you can improve yourself, your build, your gear, and nailing down specific affixes at high rolls on every piece of gear that you have, even uber uniques that can cause a massive shift in your power level if you farm Duriel enough and happen to get lucky enough as well. But the real unsung hero for build power increasing that many people just sort of forget about in favor of other things is Paragon glyph levels. The difference between a level 1 glyph and a max level 21 glyph is massive, and while most people don't let their glyphs sit at level 1 by any means, most of us tend to focus very hard on getting each of our glyphs to level 15, on the important ones at least, and then it just becomes much less of a priority for us instantly once we have the 15 for the range increase. But those last 6 levels can actually be quite a boost in power, and so if you are wanting to be as ready as possible to try and stomp the Abattoir of Zir when it comes out, this should actually be one of those things on your checklist for the next week or so. With all that said, that brings us to the main focus of today's video: what is the best, most efficient way to get glyph experience currently in the game right now? Currently, there are only 2 ways to actually gain glyph XP in the first place. One of them is, of course, Nightmare Dungeons, your expected method of gaining this, and the other one is actually just killing Beast in Ice, which is one of the endgame bosses. To fight him, you have to create a sigil, basically the same way that you would for a Nightmare Dungeon, which isn't too ideal because of course it costs you powder, but once you fight through his little mini dungeon and kill him, you do get to actually gain glyph XP and spend it on one of your glyphs. And importantly and interestingly as well, this little mini dungeon is scaled for level 85. It is technically supposed to be the equivalent of a tier 31 Nightmare Dungeon, but the glyph experience that you get at the end of it is actually worth a fair amount more than just doing a tier 31 Nightmare Dungeon, and because it's not a proper dungeon, you can also do it very quickly in comparison. So it is just worth noting that Beast in Ice is actually relatively strong value for glyph experience if you happen to also just be wanting some uniques from that boss in the first place. Otherwise, your best bet is of course Nightmare Dungeons by far, but it isn't quite as simple as saying just do Nightmare Dungeons, because of course that's obvious, it's where you know that glyph experience comes from. The thing is, if your focus is specifically glyph XP, it not only changes which dungeons are the best ones to actually focus on running if you get to choose between your sigils, it also should just change the way that you think about progressing through a Nightmare Dungeon in general. Most people are too used to properly farming them from, the bottom to top for XP or for gear, but if you are already maximum level and the only thing that you're after is actually glyph experience, then the first thing that you need to do is shift your mindset. You are not here to kill everything, so you shouldn't. In fact, in an ideal world, you would kill nothing. Never stop, never slow down, because your goal is to finish the dungeon as fast as physically possible, because glyph experience does not care how long you spend in a dungeon. It only cares about the tier of the sigil. So when doing dungeons for this purpose, you want to be killing as little as physically possible, focus only on the objectives, and you can often get in and out of the best dungeons in extremely short amounts of time, like less than 2 minutes, some of them even a minute and a half. With that said, let's talk about how to actually choose your Nightmare Dungeons then. First up, we should talk about the tier choice. The tier of Nightmare Dungeon that you do does decide the glyph XP that is rewarded at the end. However, it is worth noting the difference from one tier to the next isn't that big at all. It's around 2 glyph XP per tier increase. As a result, the ideal way to farm glyph experience is the highest Nightmare Dungeon tier that you can comfortably do without slowing down. Keep in mind that your goal is to ignore anything but objectives and just beeline it to the end. So if you reach a tier where enemies start one-shotting you as you try to walk past them, you're obviously going to be slowing yourself down a fair bit. You don't need to be able to clear the screen in a single hit, but you do just need to be able to run past enemies and anything that isn't an objective to just focus on what needs to be done without dying along the way. What I'm trying to put across is, yes, you may well be able to do tier 100 dungeons, you may well be able to complete them, and yes, they do give the most glyph experience per completion, but you have to consider how much they may be slowing you down compared to doing something like a tier 90, for example. Is it worth that difference of 20 glyph experience per completion? This isn't something that I can just give you a straight up answer on. I can't tell you what is right for you, because because it depends on your class, on your build, on your gear, and of course on your comfort playing, to put it quite simply. What is your experience on doing these higher tier dungeons? But that is the thought process that you do need to go through to find what is your most efficient choice of tier to go with. Past that, we have the big thing here, which is the best nightmare dungeons in the current rotation in Season 2 to actually run for farming glyph experience particularly, which generally speaking are simply the fastest ones to complete from walking in to walking out because of very simple to complete objectives and straightforward paths through the area. I'll be going over what I believe the top 5 are here. All of these are completable in ridiculously low amounts of time, so any of these 5 will be ideal for you, but for the most part, as long as you make a point of sticking to objectives, you'll even be fine in the slower dungeons. That said, number 1 far and away is Goa Ruins. The objective of this dungeon is, well, go to the boss room, and then once you get there, it's kill the boss. That's it. Every single other thing in this dungeon is completely optional, which means you can just straight up run start to finish, no care in the world, and get a pile of glyph XP in no time at all. Past that, the next 4 are all very close to each other in speed, but Goa Ruins did of course deserve a very particular shout out as the clear top of the top best option. The rest of the 5 though are Belfry Zakara in Hawazar region. It's just very straightforward, simple objectives. Sirocco Caverns in Kyrgyzstan, which is normally also an XP farm one, but if you actually just ignore all of the non-forced enemies, it's pretty quick too. Hallowed Ossuary in the Fractured Peaks, then also Tormented Ruins, also in the Fractured Peaks, are also very quick to actually complete. All of these can be completed in a couple of minutes, no problem, if you focus purely on objectives, and are very simply pathed from start to finish to actually make them very easy to follow without getting lost in the middle of, simply resulting in the best way to farm glyph experience currently in the game. That's pretty much it then really, just a discussion about why glyph experience is genuinely important, especially at this stage of this specific season more than any point previously in Diablo 4's lifetime up until now. And then of course a breakdown of how exactly you can best farm glyph experience with the minimum effort and time investment required to get the job done in time for the Abattoir of Zir's release. A special note again to Beast and Ice, who actually gives more glyph experience than is expected for the tier that it counts as, but other than that you just want to focus on doing the most time efficient nightmare dungeons that you can, 5 of which I pointed out to you, and also making sure that in the dungeons themselves you adjust your mindset to specifically focus on getting to the end as quickly as possible, rather than killing enemies for any particular reason. If you are at this point, it's because you're level 100. You have impeccable gear, your build is pitch perfect, and you just want the glyph XP. And so the best way to do that is to just get in and out as fast as you can. I hope you've all enjoyed this then. Maybe it's convinced you that you may need to actually grind a bit of glyph XP if you weren't going to before. Maybe it's just helped you out in some way if you already knew that you wanted to farm this up for the next week or so. Either way, I hope that it's helped you out. Like if you liked the video, subscribe with the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.